All right, welcome. We're going to be talking about, does that sound really loud back there? Is that okay? Sounds right? Volume? Okay. I'm talking really quiet right now and it just sounds very loud. We're going to be talking about ArcGIS Pro mapping and visualization in this workshop. I wanted to ask, how many of you are ArcGIS desktop users? All right. I have to step out of the light so I can see everybody. Okay, how many of you are ArcGIS Pro users? How many of you have ArcGIS Pro? All right, how many of you have ArcGIS Pro? Let me ask it that way. All right, that's a trick question. So everybody who has desktop also has ArcGIS Pro. So ArcGIS Desktop includes ArcGIS Pro. So you have both ArcMap, and if you have ArcMap, you have access to ArcGIS Pro. That's just how we released it. It's all part of one license. So you all have access to ArcGIS Pro. I want you to all to kind of start looking at it, start playing with it. It is the future. It is something we're building. It's not replacing ArcMap. It is going to eventually. So you're going to hear that, but it's a long way down the road. But when you have desktop, you have now ArcMap. That includes ArcCatalog, ArcScene, ArcGlobe, and you have ArcGIS Pro. You also have access to ArcGIS Online. You have an entitlement to ArcGIS Online. So all of you have access to the entire platform if you are a desktop user. So what is ArcGIS Pro? ArcGIS Pro is a new application. We released version 1.0 last December, so it's been out about a year. We released version 1.1 in July last year. So we're 2 releases in. It's a 64-bit native application. It won't run on a 32-bit machine. It only runs on 64-bit machines. It has a simplified user interface. Well, it's a ribbon-based user interface. It's different. For those of you who are familiar with the Office 2013 products, you'll be really familiar with Pro right off the bat. We're using the same styling, the same look, the same sort of contextual design. It's integrated tightly with ArcGIS Online. We've tried to make it work with the platform a lot more closely. So that allows us to do things like publish directly to online very easily, bring in content from online very easily. We use ArcGIS Online for managing licenses as well. So we're using it for a number of different reasons. We've really made them integrated tightly together. It has a combined 2D and 3D interface. So we're going to be talking about mapping and visualization. I want you to know as we're talking about it, you can do a lot of things with mapping and visualization in 3D as well as 2D. It has support for multiple maps and multiple layouts. How many of you guys have wanted multiple layouts in the software? Few of you. Those of you who remember the old ArcView days, the ArcView 3 days, you will remember projects and multiple layouts from ArcView. We've had requests for those ever since we went to ArcMap. ArcMap didn't have multiple layouts. People who had ArcView 3.1, 3X had multiple layouts and they loved them. So they're back. There's also things like simple search and query throughout the application. We've really made it a new modern application. If you've got an app these days, you expect to be able to search from anywhere. You know, any place you would want to find a search, or you have a list of things, or you want to find data, you're going to find a search in ArcGIS Pro. It's just part of it being a new modern application. So ArcGIS Pro is really a fusion of 3 different applications. It's a fusion of ArcMap and ArcCatalog. It's a fusion of ArcScene and ArcGlobe. And it's also a fusion of some of the City Engine functionality that we've had in the past. Or that we have. It's not in the past. I don't know what I'm talking about. the City Engine functionality. So meaning you can use the rules that you develop for displaying City Engine buildings and City Engine features in ArcGIS Pro. You can combine those in. So it's really a combined best of 2D and 3D. It's all built using a new contextual ribbon user interface. Like I said, if you're familiar with Office 2013, you'll be familiar with ArcGIS Pro right off the bat. The ribbon and the contextual user interface we've found is a very good way to take a complex program, a complex application like ArcMap, and make the functionality very focused so it only shows up when you need it to. So the things you want to do are only available at the time you need them. It's a way to really clean up the user interface. You don't have 64 toolbars to pick from. You're only getting the toolbars you need when you need them. And it takes a little getting used to. So if you're using ArcMap, the first time you use ArcGIS Pro, you're going to start going, well, where is X? Where's my favorite tool? And it takes a little bit to kind of figure out where we've moved things and where they come in. But once you start getting the hang of it, we find that everybody has the same experience. The first day, they get a little frustrated. They're trying to find things. They're not finding what they want. And then they start to kind of figure it out. And the second day, they've got it figured out. They know where things are. And by the third day, there's enough new cool stuff and some amazing like fast drawing, and just the interface works so much better that they just love it and they never want to go back. And we've had that same experience every time we've rolled this out to either a new customer, a new holistic testing group. We have the same experience. So it's intuitive, meaning if you're an ArcMap user, it's going to be very familiar. We still have a table of contents. We still have, the add data button, still have analysis tabs, geoprocessing is still there, model builder is still there. So it's going to be very similar to what you're used to. It'll be familiar. So it won't be that big of a jump to move to Pro. It's project-based. So where ArcMap, everything centers around the .mxd, the map document, and the geodatabase. In Pro, everything is focused around a project, and a project can have many maps. It can have many layouts. It can have many database connections. It can store all your toolboxes and tool sets with it, all your favorites. You can store all your styles in a project, and when you want to move that, you package it all up and send a project package to someone, and they get everything that they need to work on that project. So it's a nice way to kind of package up all your work. It's very much map focused. So when you start looking at the interface for ArcGIS Pro, you're going to notice that all of the menus, all of the buttons are very subdued. We've used muted colors. We've kind of made them gray, and we've tried to have them fall back to the background. We really want the map to be the focus of the attention of the application, because that's what you work with every day. You work with the maps. We wanted that to be front and center. And so we've really made that all focused. And we've merged them all together into a single application. Like I said, 2D and 3D are together. The functionality from ArcCatalog and all those different apps that make up ArcGIS for desktop all fill into ArcGIS Pro as well. So any questions about Pro so far? All right, I'm going to open up to questions at the end. We'll have a lot of time for questions, I think. We typically get a lot of questions about ArcGIS Pro. So I'm going to move on and talk about the mapping and visualization side of Pro. And of course, there are many aspects to Pro. There's analysis and geoprocessing. There's editing and database management and imagery and all of these different parts of Pro. We don't have time to cover all of them in this workshop. So I'm going to focus mostly on the mapping part of it for this workshop. So we had several things in mind when we were developing Pro, and the mapping side is key to the whole application. One of the first things we've done is we built a multi-threaded application that really improves the drawing performance. So you'll hear this, everyone will talk about 64-bit, and they'll say it's faster. Well, 64-bit doesn't necessarily make anything faster. That's kind of a myth. So what really makes it faster is the fact that we've taken all the different drawing aspects and we've moved them to different threads. So everybody has at least a quad-core machine, right? Everybody's got multiple processors on their computer. Well, ArcMap will always only use one of those processors. It's just the architecture of it, how it was built. Pro will use all of your processors. It will take things like the labeling, and it'll do that on one core, one thread, and it will take drawing and move that to another thread. If you're running an analysis tool, it'll run that on a different thread. The interface has a dedicated thread, so the interface should always stay open, always be available. So it's fast, and it draws fast, and that's a result of that multi-threaded technology. We've also improved the graphics and how things draw. We've got native anti-aliasing that's part of it. Anti-aliasing lets you smooth out the edges of things and smooth out the edges of your text. It draws it and makes it look crisper and cleaner. It's got a brand new drawing engine under the hood that supports things like native transparency. So when you export a file, how many of you have exported a file that had a bitmap pattern in it or a transparent layer from ArcMap, and in your resulting PDF file you get a big raster layer that has everything sandwiched together? Yeah? Okay, you won't get that in Pro. Pro honors the transparency, and you'll get native transparent layers in your output files. Another thing we've done is we've decoupled maps from layouts. So what that means is you can have a layout that doesn't have a map on it. Now, why would I want that? So in ArcMap, you always have a layout on every page. You can't delete the layout, or you can't delete the map from the layout without it popping back up. In Pro, you can have a layout that's just dedicated to maybe a title page, or maybe you have some charts and graphs or a picture you want to put on one of the pages. Well, you can do that and not have a map on the page. It also cleans up some of the things we have with regard to if you want to make a blank page in ArcMap, you have to kind of drag the map off and hide it, which is kind of a horrible way to do it, but that's the only way you can do it in ArcMap. We've got a unified symbol model in Pro. So what does that mean? Well, by comparison, ArcMap has 4 or more different symbol models that are going on at any one time. You have the standard symbols, for lack of a better term, the regular symbols. Then you have representations, which are a different symbol model altogether. You have another symbol model for raster, and you have another symbol model for charts and graphs and those kinds of things. Well, in Pro, all of those are merged together into one unified single symbol model. And it makes it a better experience for doing things like authoring symbols that you want to maybe match all the colors across, or do things like that. It just makes for a better experience for both working with the symbology and gives you a better output at the end. So we've done a lot with regard to 3D cartography in Pro. A lot more than we ever had in ArcScene or ArcGlobe, because we've got this unified model that also includes 3D symbols. It also includes the city engine rules. And so you can do a lot more with 3D cartography. And we're seeing the amount of what we call 3D cartography or 3D visualizations just growing like crazy. Tons of these new 3D models and 3D images are coming out, and that's just good. It's showing that you can really show some things a lot better in 3D. And there's some things maybe that shouldn't be in 3D, and we can talk about that too. I've seen some of those as well. But 3D cartography's really come a long way. The other thing we've done is we've improved the exports. So the exporters are faster. Because we control the drawing environment and the entire drawing pipeline, we can improve how all of we control every aspect of everything as it gets exported. So we've really improved the exporting. It also comes into things like the native transparency and the anti-aliasing. Those all improve your exports as well. So just kind of the high-level mapping user experience. These were the design goals. of the development team as we were developing Pro. The first one is to emphasize your work, not the UI, and that goes back to what I was talking about before. We've tried to make the map the focus of your attention. Oh, went too far. So layer symbology and labeling. We've tried to put in better support for both defining symbols, and if any of you have built symbols in ArcMap, you know that you can go through layer upon layer of menu to get to your symbol. I think there are certain places in ArcMap where you can go in 17 menus deep in the symbol definition, which is kind of crazy. In Pro, they're all right in one pane, and we can control all the symbol properties from one location, and it's just such a better experience for defining the symbology. Labeling is also another big thing in Pro. We've been able to include the Maplex label engine as the default engine because everything draws so much faster. So what that means is once we're drawing the labels on a separate thread, you can make changes and tweaks to the labeling and have it just automatically update those without having to go hit apply and wait for it to redraw all your labels. I mean, they happen fast enough that you can see these changes on the fly as you're doing them. I'll show you some of this in some of the demos. Another thing we've tried to do is make layer properties changeable across many layers. So how many of you have ever wanted to change the font size for 6 of your layers and make them all like 2 points bigger? Or something like that. Or you want to change the color of 7 different layers. You have to, in ArcMap, go through one layer at a time and change every single one. In Pro, you can select all of those layers and make the change once, and it happens to all the layers. It's a really nice feature, and one of the things that we'd been asked for years, and just because of the way ArcMap was architected, it was very difficult for us to do it. But since we rebuilt Pro from scratch, we could do something like that. We also wanted to provide quicker access to commonly used functions. So like I said before, we had we have in ArcMap that deep menu structure where you're going through many menus to get to something. And in Pro, we wanted the most common things you're using to be up front and center and be at the very top. It makes things more efficient. The other thing we wanted to do is ease the differences between 2D and 3D. And this is really important. So I'll get into this a little bit more, but 2D and 3D have to be different. They can't be exactly the same, and that's because there are different properties that you have to deal with in 2D and 3D. But we wanted to take it, and where all those properties were similar, where they overlapped, we wanted to make sure that you only had those properties once. And then for the 3D aspects, you can get to 3D. For the 2D aspects, well, pretty much they all roll into 3D, but we wanted to ease those differences. So the results are really, we have 2D maps and 3D maps. And you're going to hear them called scenes and maps, basically. And the scenes is basically a 3D map. So they're very similar. So 2D maps and 3D maps are similar. They all have layers. They all have coordinate systems. They all have bookmarks. But they usually have different goals. So a 2D map, for example, you may be trying to display all the attributes or all the properties of in this case, a power pole. You notice how I just did that? So in 2D, you're quite often displaying different kinds of information, and you're oftentimes wanting to display more information. Whereas 3D, I just looked at that and I knew it was a power pole. I didn't need to have a legend or a reason to explain that. It just visually looks like a power pole. And these are some of the differences between 2D and 3D. So you don't necessarily need to represent them the same way, and you quite often don't. Oftentimes you're letting the visualization in 3D tell you what it is. Some layers aren't useful in 2D. You know, elevation. If you can have contours, right, to show elevation. But if you don't have some sort of 3D visualization showing you the landform, elevation really isn't that useful in 2D. Multi-patches, so those are graphic representations of things that are in 3D objects. So you might have a building or a tree or something. Those aren't very useful in 2D. And extruded features, again, adding 3D properties to a 2D object. So we actually have, so the solution we came up with, this difference between 2D and 3D maps in ArcGIS Pro, is that we have now two kinds of maps. We have a map and a scene. Map being 2D, scene being 3D. I just mentioned that before. You can import maps from ArcMap into Pro. So those are your MXDs. You can import scenes and globes from ArcScene and ArcGIS or ArcGlobe. Those are .sxd files and .3dd files. And you can import those into either a local scene or a global scene. And there's a difference, and I'll talk about that a little bit. You can also create new maps and scenes, add data to them, edit their coordinate systems, and then you can take a 2D map and convert it to a 3D scene. So you're not just viewing your 3D data in, or you're not just viewing your 2D data in 3D. You're actually converting 2D data to 3D data. And what that does is it adds things like, you need something like a height or an extrusion value, or you need some 3D attributes to be able to drive the 3D aspects of 2D. And that's what converting it does for you. You can then, once you've created a 2D map and a 3D map, you can copy layers between the two, and they'll just show up in 3D once you copy the layer, or show up in 2D. You can use bookmarks between the two. So in one map you might have a bookmark that zooms to a location, and you'll get an appropriate representation in 2D or in 3D of where that bookmark is. And you can link them together for navigation. I did that in my demo this morning. So I'm spending a lot of time on 2D and 3D, but it's kind of important when you get into Pro, because you then have to start making choices like this. So there's two types of 3D worlds. We've got a globe and a local view. And in ArcGlobe, you had a global coordinate system, which is the globe, the curvature of the Earth. You have large data. So typically you're looking at global data when you're looking at a whole globe. You're not zooming into a narrow city or something. And so it takes into account the curvature of the Earth. And you can have multiple surfaces all in there acting as one, all draped over a single globe. Now in ArcScene, you had a projected view. So it looks like a little fish tank. And it's all tied to an area of interest, and it's typically a smaller area. You know, you're not getting anything really bigger than a city. So it would support local data only, and only one surface per layer. Well, in Pro, we've taken these aspects out of a scene. So you can actually make a scene with very large data sets in Pro. And you can also use multiple surfaces for each layer in Pro, meaning you can have multiple elevation surfaces. So that's something that we've done to extend 3D in ArcGIS Pro. Local scene, you could do a local scene of, you know, the entire world if you really wanted to. All right, some terminology changes. We have made a few terminology changes between ArcMap and Pro, and I just kind of want to go through these because as I talk, I don't want to confuse you with them. So in ArcMap, we had a data frame on the page, and that held all your data. In Pro, we have a map, which makes more sense. It's a map that actually goes on your page, not a data frame. In ArcMap, we had globe views we had globes and scenes. In Pro, we have globe views and scene views. So it's just two different ways of looking at the same 3D map, the same scene. So you can switch between a local view and a global view of any of your 3D maps in Pro, which is kind of cool. Instead of color ramps, we have color schemes. Instead of marker symbols, we're now calling those point symbols. Fill symbols go to polygon symbols. It's just a little more intuitive names. And symbol layer becomes symbol layer of type, marker, stroke, or fill. So some of this is happening because of the changes we've made in the symbol model. Now that we've got one unified symbol model, we've taken all the representations and merged them in with the rest of the symbol model. So any symbol in Pro can have a geometric effect. It can have any of the things that you have with the representation, and that's influenced some of this terminology. So in this example, I've got a polygon symbol that's made up of a black stroke and a green fill layer. So just an idea of how that changes. So layout enhancements in Pro. The layouts are the biggest thing is support for multiple layouts. That's been one of the biggest user requests we've had. I think it was within the top 5 easily. I think it was in the top 3 of the ideas site. If any of you guys have used the ideas site. You can now put scenes or 3D maps in a layout. You couldn't do that in ArcMap. In ArcMap, you'd have to export your scene out to a JPEG file or a TIFF file and then put that on your layout. Here you can put the actual 3D map in your layout. There's a layout contents pane. So you can get all the layers that are part and associated with your layout in a contents pane, just like you have layers in your map. And you can control the draw order and get to their properties and do things like that from it. Like I said before, we've decoupled the map from the layout. So if any of you, what that's done is, have any of you in ArcMap actually gone in and changed the extent of your map and then gone to your layout and it's messed up your layout extent? Some of you. I've done it a million times in my life, probably more than a million, and there's nothing more frustrating. This gets rid of that problem. They're not tied together in any way. If you have a map on a layout and you have a map that you're working on in another map view, they're not tied together at all. So there's a lot of things that this helps. The other thing we've done is we've removed any printer dependencies on the application. So in ArcMap, when you create a map document, it always wants to associate your default printer with that map document. Do you guys know that? Some of you? What that means is if your printer has a set of standard page sizes, those travel with that map document. If you send that map document to a friend who doesn't have the same printer or doesn't have the same printer page sizes, he may get a map that's messed up. He'll open it up and it'll have chopped off part of his map. Any of you ever had that happen? Yeah, a few. I've had that happen before many times as well. It's very frustrating when it does. We've removed all those dependencies from Pro, so it doesn't matter. You don't have to ever be tied to a printer or any of the printer settings. Just a couple of things. ArcGIS Pro 1.0, we released it without rulers and guides, which was just a result of we didn't have time to get them done, but everybody really complained bitterly because that looked like something that was very missing, which it was. So we've added those at 1.1 that came out last summer. Also, all the snapping in the layout and the rulers and guides and everything we added at 1.1. So some of the export improvements that I talked about. Like I said, one of them is support for transparency. So if you look at where I've got a couple of these restaurants, I don't know if you can tell, but in the upper one, this is ArcMap, and it's got a text halo, and that halo is knocking out all the roads and things underneath it. I've applied a transparency for that in Pro. So in Pro, I can just apply a transparency around the edges, and I just kind of get light gray. And so it supports native transparency. Anti-aliasing is also happening, improved graphics. So you'll notice the roads and the line work in the ArcMap version have a little jagged stair-stepped effect. And you see that? The same area in Pro, you'll notice, look a lot smoother. This is because of the anti-aliasing going on. The graphics look crisper, they look cleaner. It's part of the new drawing engine, and it's a great advantage to Pro. Drawing is faster, export is faster, smaller file sizes. Well, so let me clarify that. With our export, sometimes you're going to get smaller file sizes. Sometimes they're actually going to get bigger. So the reason is because the actual improvements to the transparency and things like that make it so we end up with smaller file sizes if you're using a lot of raster data, because it can just create a single transparent layer. It's not going to smash everything together into a great big raster. So that'll make a file smaller. The improved graphics drawing will actually make it larger. So the anti-aliasing, it's got to keep track of that and store it. Also, we're always exporting on the highest level of quality. So you're going to get a mixture. Some of the files will be a little bigger, some will be a little smaller. Just keep in mind they're going to be different from ArcMap to ArcGIS Pro. All right, we're going to get to some demos here soon, but I think this is the last slide, I hope. So map automation. How many of you guys use ArcPy.mapping? All right, a few of you, quite a few actually. So all your Python scripts will almost just work in Pro. There are a few changes. So our map automation, we have a Python module that allows you to script automating mapping workflows. So you can script, sending a bunch of maps to a printer, or exporting a whole bunch of maps and moving things around on the page and updating your titles. And there's a way to automate all of that with Python. We have a module called ArcPy.mapping in ArcMap. In Pro, it's called ArcPy.mp. That was just to match all the other standard mapping or other standard Python modules we had. So the main thing that's going to happen when you migrate is we're going from Python 2.7 in ArcMap to Python 3.4 in Pro. And there's a few syntax changes that happen, so those need to be taken into account. So your existing scripts aren't just going to work, but those scripting changes are pretty simple. The other thing that you'll run into is in Pro, we're using project files and layouts within a project file. In ArcMap, you always just had one map document and one layout. So we never had to care about which layout you were pointing at. It was just the one. So in Pro, you have to actually go in and reference the actual project you're using and the layout you're using. And so that changes a little bit. The other thing is just support for multiple layouts and being able to point to the right layout. So let's do some demos, because I'm tired of giving slides. Are there any questions so far before I can't see you guys? The light totally blocks it out and I can't see you guys at all. Yes? Can I export or import a map layout from Pro back into ArcMap? No, they only go one direction. So it would be a very loss-intensive operation to go back the other way. There's so many new things in Pro, transparency, new symbol model, that it doesn't go backwards. But all right, let me get into a couple demos. All right, now hold your questions, because if you have them, I can't see any of you right now. I know you guys can't see me either behind this big monitor. But I just kind of wanted to go through a couple of things. First of all, this is a map somewhere in England. I've taken this map from ArcMap and I've simply imported it. So when you get started with ArcGIS Pro, can go to this import map, and you can import any of your existing map documents into Pro. And like I just said, they'll come forward into Pro. It'll go through a conversion process and convert the symbols all to the new model, and it will bring them in, and they'll look exactly the same, but you can't go back to ArcMap from Pro. So once you import your map, you've got a table of contents. You've got a map view. If you've got bookmarks, those will come in. You've got your standard kind of add data, selection tools, all of that kind of thing, access to your attributes, measure, locate, those kind of tools on this first ribbon. You've got a table of contents, which is going to be very similar to how ArcMap had them. In this table of contents, you can look at the drawing order, the data source view, what's selectable, what's editable. You can show list by snapping. So how many of you guys have used snapping in the past in ArcMap? And we've changed it around a couple of times, and then it disappeared for a little while, and then we changed it. It's actually very improved in Pro. And then we've got labeling. Labeling will give you all of the different layers that are being labeled and give you access to that. And I'm going to start by just kind of going through, well, let me go in and show you kind of how the project's organized as well. So again, you can have multiple maps in your project, and I've got 2 of them in this one. You can have multiple layouts in your project, multiple toolboxes, database connections, all of those kinds of things. One of the things that's different in Pro from ArcMap is we don't have as many styles. So you can bring in any of your ArcMap styles into Pros. There are, I should know this off the top of my head. I think 75 different styles in ArcMap. It's somewhere in there. It's like, it was 68, but I think we're up to like 75. We don't install all of those styles when you install Pro. So keep that in mind when you first install Pro. If your favorite symbols are in the crime style, and there is a crime style, they won't install by default. You need to go import those from ArcMap. We are working on a way, well actually at 1.2 you will be able to download those from ArcGIS Online, so you can download any of the styles. By default we install like 3 new styles, a new ArcGIS 2D style, 3D style, and a colors file. And we've got something new, which is a color brewer color schemes, and this is from a professor in the United States named Cindy Brewer, who's done a lot of research on color schemes, and we've added all her color schemes in by default. So styles in Pro get installed into the project, so they're not just referenced on a disk somewhere. You can actually reference them from the project, and that way when you package the project, the styles that are used will go and travel with it. So if you've customized any of the symbols or you've used specific symbols, those will get packaged and custom. So everything in your project gets packaged up together. So that's just kind of an organizational thing. Let's go back to our map. Oops. So, so the first thing I want to talk about is I'm going to go back to my layers. And if I select a layer, I don't know if you noticed this, I got 3 new tabs that showed up. I'll just turn them off, and then if I select this layer, they're all going to come on again. So these are what I'm talking about in terms of contextual user interface. If I want to adjust the appearance or the labeling or work with the data, I need to select a layer that I want to work with. If I don't have a layer selected, if I'm just on the map, I don't get those interfaces. So I'm just going to select a layer, and this is my towns layer. If I want to change the symbology for that layer, I can do that through the Appearance tab. These just have little dots for the symbols. I'm going to do symbology a little later. So what I wanted to look at here was labeling. So Labeling is all managed now through a single ribbon. So you don't have several places to go. Everything is right on the ribbon. You can get to your label classes. So I've got 3 different label classes in my towns. I can turn on and off my labeling with just a click of a button here. By default, it's using the Maplex label engine, and I've got some of the basic label settings here that I can pick and choose from. Or if I want to get into all of the label properties that are available through Maplex, I can do it just by opening up this window, this pane. And I've got all my different placement options, and I can go through and make adjustments to these. Whoops, I've got an invalid character. Hang on. All right. Let's try that. So if I want to adjust some of the properties, and I just bumped up the offset between the point and the actual label. I don't know if you can see when I'm doing that. It's, if you look at Upham here, Upham? I don't know how to pronounce it. It's adjusting all of the labels just with that one parameter, and it's doing it all on the fly as I change the property. The labeling happens so fast that I don't have to like hit apply and wait for all the labels to redraw. And this happens throughout all of the symbology and throughout, well, there's some places in symbology where you have to hit apply. But what it does is it allows you to design a map as you go along. You can sit and make adjustments and see what it's going to look like immediately. You don't have to keep going back and forth between menus and hitting apply and cancel and that sort of thing. So that's kind of a nice feature, and you've got access again to all of your different Maplex label rules, your abbreviations, you know, if you wanted to automatically reduce font size, or your positioning rules, you know, if I want to remove duplicate labels, those kinds of things. So all of those Maplex rules are in there. That's the default. We still have the standard Esri label engine as part of Pro, but it's not on by default. It's really just there. So when you bring in maps from ArcMap, and you've used that in the past, it'll keep the same labels. But what we're finding is because of the speed of drawing and how fast the labeling goes and how much higher the quality is of the Maplex labeling, people are just using Maplex with it, and they're not using the standard engine much anymore. So other things I can do. I can, if let's say I wanted to adjust the label properties of more than one layer at a time, I can go in and select, say, all of these label classes at once, and I can adjust and say I'm going to make all of them bigger, just one point at a time. And as I go through here and do this, all the placement's getting readjusted for me. It's using all of the rules that I've set up, and it's doing it to all 3 of these layers at once. If I wanted to adjust, you know, some of these other labels at the same time, I can actually select many layers and make them all smaller or all bigger. So I can make changes to more than one layer at a time, which is very nice. Now another thing I wanted to show you in Pro, and this is actually very cool, is the undo and redo. So in the undo stack, it's going to keep track of everything you've done, and it's going to give you a list of all those. So you can see I've been bumping text up and down in size, and I just went through all that. I also changed all these label placement rules, and I can select all of those and undo them all at once. So did you guys see that? I just undid 17 operations. I didn't have to just go hit undo, 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 undo. I can go through and select how far back in the stack I want to undo and undo it. It's very cool and comes in very handy. Other thing I could do, so you know, if I've got one label class selected and I want to change the color, and we'll make them a blue color for lack of a better. So I could do that with one or if I select, you know, all 3 layers at the same, whoops, at the same time, I could make them all, let's make them all green. And so I can change things from more than 1 layer at once. Something very helpful. And again, I can undo both those at the same time. Come back to black. All right. I'm going to change gears here a little bit and go to symbology, and I'm just going to actually go to a different map to do that. So I'm going to close this one. Are there any questions about labeling so far? No? Okay. Okay. Here we go. So another thing about Pro is it starts a lot faster than ArcMap ever did. Just keep that in mind. All right, and I'm going to load up this Denver transit map. Maybe. Oh, clicked on the wrong thing. So this is a simple transit map. So it shows me my rail stations, some fire engines, some bicycle stations, and my network of bike paths and a few things. And I've just overlaid that on top of a base map. But this is just a very, very, very simple map. But I wanted to just use it to show you some things. So if I wanted to change one of the symbols, I can go in and just click on the symbol. It will bring up, I've actually used bicycle in the past. It will bring up initially my gallery of symbols. And you'll notice I have a whole different set of symbols you probably haven't seen before if you haven't used Pro yet. But we've rebuilt, or we've built entirely new default symbols for ArcGIS Pro. So all those default symbols in ArcMap that you've gotten used to, they're not the defaults in Pro. We've tried to modernize the symbols. We've tried to make them better. We've also tried to improve how they work in conjunction with web maps. So they work really well both on a printed map and a web map, and we've tried to incorporate that. The other thing we've done is when you're working with a style of maps, is we've come up with different ways to view them and sort them. So you can group them by category. In the symbols that we've built a series of 3. So we've built large symbols, medium-sized symbols, and smaller symbols, which I don't have loaded, because quite often we had people who wanted to use different sizes, and they just wanted to be able to pick from them without going and just changing all their styles. So you can pick from different sizes. Let me group them by. You've got different ways to view them as well: list view and icon view. We've also created 3 different schemes of symbols that work well together in the default symbols. So you've got a scheme 1, a scheme 2, and scheme 3. And all the colors are coordinated with each other, the symbol sizes and things like that. So if you're making a map and you want a number of symbols that are going to look good together, you can just grab all the ones from one scheme and use that. So I can either pick a new symbol from a gallery, or I can go into the symbol properties. And the symbol properties, I have 3 different views of the symbol properties. And you're used to probably seeing this one in ArcMap, which is the first one that comes up. And this just gives you a way to quickly change the color. I'll make that purple. Or the point size. And my color must be locked. Oh, we'll go back. You can also add a halo around it if you want from this menu. Now with when you get into the actual symbol properties, you can get to all the symbol properties through the different layers. And so I'm going to unlock that. So I can change the appearance. I can go in here, we'll change the color, and we'll make this purple. And we'll make the outline color purple too, a different color purple. And I can do this per layer, or I can select both layers and do it one at a time. I've got different options for that. And then one of the nice things, and I actually really like this. So if you guys use define symbols in ArcMap, you get a preview that gives you, I think, yeah, 100% or 200, 400. These are the options. But in Pro, you can actually dynamically zoom in and out on your symbol, so you can get really close. So I can actually see what the pedals of this bicycle really look like in the preview in the symbol, which is kind of a nice feature. And I can go through and let's change the fill color as well. So once I've made those changes, I can apply them all at once. We'll just do that. And if I like that symbol, which I really don't, but I'm for purposes of this, I can save that to my style. And it's going to save it to something we call favorites. So instead of, in ArcMap, you end up with a file, a style with your name on it. It's whoever you're logged in as. In Pro, we have this concept of favorites, and favorites show up everywhere, and you can use them in a number of different places. So I'm going to use favorites for this, and we'll call this one bicycle yellow. And I can give it a category, and these are all those different categories I was talking about. So these are where the schema categories come into play. I'm just going to give this one a category of default. And then we'll tag them, and once you tag it, then it'll allow you to search for those tags if you're searching for bicycle. If I could spell here. Too hard. All right, we'll just call it bike. All right. So now if I go back to my gallery, I've got my favorite style that I've just created, and I can go back and forth between these. And you'll notice I don't have to go into a menu and hit apply and cancel, and I don't have this menu that pops up in front of the map while I'm doing this. I can just simply change the symbol. So the other thing I wanted to show you was some other kinds of symbology. So we've got the same principle with regard to line symbology. But one of the things you'll notice is if I go into the different layers, this just has one layer, is I've got geometric effects. I've got a geometric dash effect applied to this dashed line. So all of those complex things you could do with representations in ArcMap, you can do with Pro as just part of the standard symbol because it's all the same symbol model. So in this case, I've got a dash, and I've specified the dash template is 4, 4. I could change that to 4, 2, 2, and that's going to mix up my dash pattern a little bit. I can change the width. Let me actually change this back to, let's make it 8, 8, and make that dash a little bigger. Hit apply. And so that's extended that dash. Now the one thing I've done is I've added a geometric effect to this where I can have the dash end with certain constraints. So I can have it end where it intersects with other lines with a full pattern, with a half pattern, that kind of thing. So that where it connects with other lines, it's going to give you a full connection. And so all of those geometric effects and things can be added, and I can add additional geometric effects to a line as well if I wanted to, to add a smooth to it or something like that. And then these are all straight, but imagine that that's going to smooth that line a bit. So all of that is possible just through the standard symbology in Pro. All right, let me close a couple of these. Now I'm going to move on to layouts. So once I've gone in, I've symbolized my map the way I want. So you can use any of the standard fonts for symbols in Pro, just like you would in ArcMap. You can build symbols up from the ground up if you want to. If you have existing symbols, you can use those. Let me insert a new page layout. So page layouts, we now give you this kind of great graphic representation of different page sizes. And this is going to change depending on your location. So I have an American computer, obviously, right? And so I get these American sizes as my defaults, and they come up to the top. So I see letter, legal, tabloid, and they're all defined in inches and architectural and things like that. If you are logging in from a European machine, if you have a European locale, you're by default going to get the metric equivalent. So you'll get, you know, A5, A3, all the millimeter defined ones. You'll get, you know, all of these in landscape and portrait will be at the top of your pick list. So we've tried to do things so that when you're working in native locations, we know not everybody is in America. So anyway, I'm just going to pick a layout here to work with, and I'll just grab a portrait layout size. And that's going to give me a page layout to start with. I'm going to get rulers. Again, if you're in a European locale, they're going to by default be in metric. Mine are by default in inches. But I can do things like add guides. You know, the same way I would have in ArcMap, I can right-click and add a guide. Add a guide here at an inch, and I can do that one at a time. Or I can go through and I'm going to remove all the guides. And I've got something new that is actually the ability to add more than one guide at once. So I can add multiple guides. And I can add them horizontally, vertically, or both. And I'm just going to add them both because this is something I often do when I'm doing a page layout. One of the first things I always do is add guides, and I'll either offset them from the edge, and then I can give them a size. And so that'll automatically add all those guides at once. I don't have to add them over and over again. Or if I want to add a guide that is vertically right down the center, I can do that. So it's just a way to quickly add guides to your layout. And then I'm going to do the same thing I would do in ArcMap. I'm going to insert maps. And when I've got maps in my when I've got maps that are now decoupled from the layout, I need to let it know what extent I want to use when I add a map to my layout. And I should have done this before, but what I'm going to do is create a bookmark here. And we'll call this bookmark transit map. And then when I go to insert a map on my page, I get all the bookmarks as options. I also get the default views, and I also get any view of what I'm zoomed to. So I could have just used that, but I wanted to show you how I could grab a bookmark and use that to add a map to my frame. And that's going to add that and zoom to that bookmark for me. And it's by default snapped to my guides, but I can go in and adjust the size. Now one thing you might notice, and it's kind of hard to see probably for you guys in the back, but as I hover over any of those points, I'm getting the coordinates of where that point is on the page. So as this is telling me where that is, and if I start to move something, it's going to update. And you see how it's kind of updating. So as I'm positioning things on the page, I can position them very accurately. I can follow that as I'm doing it. And I can also, it's kind of jumpy at the moment. I'm snapping to this guide, so I can snap very easily to any of the guides on my page or snap to other things on the page. So I can insert things like, maps, obviously. North arrows. I've got all the kind of standard ArcGIS north arrows. Let me insert that on the page. And again, I'll drag that and position it somewhere. Now here's something else that's happening that we've added in Pro. This is something called smart snapping, or we call it smart snapping. I don't know how smart it is. But you'll notice when I get close to the edge of that map frame, I get a little dashed line, and it just automatically snaps to it. So I can pick if I want to snap to those edges of what's already there. And it's just a really quick way to line things up as I'm snapping. And so I can snap to guides. I can also use smart mapping or smart snapping to snap to things. So I'll insert a legend. Let me insert a scale bar. And I can snap that to the center of the guide as well. And let me zoom in here so you can see this a little better. So one of the things you'll notice is hello, it's thinking about it. If I select a scale bar, I'm going to get contextual tabs about the scale bar. So I'll get a design tab and a format tab. The design tab allows me to go in and change any of the properties of the scale bar. So I don't have to go through a whole great big series of menus to do this. It's all right in the menu here. So I didn't really want miles. I really wanted kilometers. So let's change it to kilometers. Actually, that's kind of lousy too. Let me change it to meters. And then I can change the number of subdivisions and divisions just by changing them here. And you'll notice as I'm making these changes, it's just making them to the map. I'm not having to hit apply and cancel. I can kind of design as I go and just make little adjustments and see how that's represented. All of that is possible with Pro. And that's, again, thanks to that multi-threaded drawing environment. I can insert a legend, and you'll notice I can still get to all the layers. And I actually want to insert a legend for all these items. So you can pick and choose which items you want included in your legend. And then I'll just draw a little legend here. And that'll create my legend. And again, I can get to the properties of the legend as well through the panes. And what else do I want to insert here? So one of the things you might notice is as I've been adding things to my layout, they've been showing up in a table of contents, right? So let me change my default symbol. Let's make it something you guys can see. And let me just insert a rectangle on my page. And I'm just going to insert a rectangle around this. Now when I do that, it just covered everything up on my layout, right? Well, in ArcMap, I would take that and I would go send down, send to back, whatever. In Pro, I can control exactly where that is layered by just adjusting where it falls in the table of contents. So I can draw it down underneath my north arrow, but still above my transit map. And so you can see how I can control the layering a lot better. Another thing I can do is I can go into the properties of that rectangle and go into the symbol, and I can adjust the color, and I can make that color transparent. So this is something in Pro that's very powerful, is you can apply transparency to any color in Pro. So it doesn't, you don't have to do it at the layer level. Well, you can do it at the layer level, but if you want to adjust the transparency of just your halo around your text or just one color in a multi-layered symbol, you can adjust the property there. And so any color can be transparent. So I'm just going to apply 60% transparency to that. And now you'll just see it's transparent if I draw it back above the legend and everything. So, so now again, we've made transparency native. It's also transparency can be used in the layout, in the graphics, in the layout. You couldn't do that in ArcMap. It's a big advantage to it. So again, you've got access to all the kind of standard elements, text, dynamic text. Again, if you want to add the date you're exported or the current time or something like that, you can use all the different dynamic text formats. So this just pulled the time, which is my computer, which says it's 9:06 a.m. for me. So I should just be getting out of bed in the morning. No, I don't get up that late. Anyway, from here, whoops, we can share our map, right? And we share our map either by printing it, exporting it. And in this case, I'll just export this map. It's not the greatest map in the world, but actually it's not even close. But like I said, it'll export it. It'll use native transparency in the export file. And I can open that up and you can see what I've just kind of created in my map. And again, if I go to the layers, I can turn off that rectangle. It hasn't mashed all those layers together and made one big raster layer. It's the rectangle is separate. It's still transparent. And one more thing I wanted to show you real quick. I'm running out of time. So another thing I didn't really show you is, so in addition to authoring maps for paper products, which many of us still do, you can also author these maps and then publish them as a web map or to online as a single layer. And so if I wanted to share this map, I can go in and I can export it and save it as a web map or a web layer. And in this case, if I want to save it as a web map, I give it a name, a summary. I can give it some tags. Let me just close this. Bicycle map. And sorry, I'm having trouble typing at the moment. And then I can choose who I want to share it with. So these are groups within my organization. I can share it. I'm part of the product management team. I could share it to everyone. I could share it, and then I'll just analyze that map. And since there are no errors, I can just hit share, and that'll share that map. And then anything I've authored in this map, for example, pop-ups. Let me show you how we author pop-ups. They can be configured in ArcGIS Pro. And so the pop-up for my bicycle station has these 3 fields of all my attributes, 4 fields. And then it also has a URL to a picture. So I can have pictures in my pop-ups. And so then, you know, if I select that in Pro, you're going to see what that pop-up's going to look like. When I publish that to ArcGIS Online, just minimize this, and let's go to ArcGIS Online. So under my content, I've published this before, and I'm just going to open that in the map viewer. And you'll see you get the exact same map in ArcGIS Online. So this is available over the web. It's available to anybody's device. So I could look at this on my phone. And if I go in and select one of the bicycle stations, I get the exact same pop-up that I authored in Pro. So all of that can be authored and then shared via ArcGIS Online. So I've only got about 10 minutes left, so I wanted to leave a little time for questions. Let me see if I had anything more in the slide deck. Just to kind of, we get a number of common questions every time we're presenting Pro, it seems like. One of those is will ArcMap continue? And yes, absolutely, ArcMap is continuing. Like I said, Pro is being added to, and it doesn't have all the functionality ArcMap has, but we're continuing to add to it. ArcMap will be around for many, many years, though, so ArcMap will be there for you. ArcGIS Pro is a new part of desktop. It just comes with your desktop license, so all of you who have desktop have ArcGIS Pro. You can start playing with it tomorrow if you want. Well, if you're here, it might be hard, but day after tomorrow. ArcMap and ArcGIS Pro will run side by side on the same computer at the same time. You can be running one and the other simultaneously. They are separate installs. You have a separate install for Pro. It downloads it off the web. Typically, to get started, the best way to get started is to start importing your existing maps and scenes and globes. That's pretty much what we do to get going. It should support all your models and scripts. There are certain geoprocessing tools that aren't available in Pro yet, so if your model's missing that, you'll run into that. There's a fantastic tool called Analyze for Pro. Let me. Whoops, that's Earth. So this will be very helpful to you. So if I go to my geoprocessing tools and I just do a search, Analyze Tools for Pro, there's this tool. And what you can do is you can feed it any geoprocessing model or any Python script, and it will tell you if it will just work in Pro or if it needs a few changes. And then it will give you a report on what changes it needs. So majority of your geoprocessing and your Python scripts are just going to work. The ones that don't, this will tell you. And so you don't have to run the tool and have it crash and go, oh, why did it crash? And try to figure it out yourself. This will tell you. Let's see. All right. ArcGIS Pro comes with the same license levels as ArcMap, basic, standard, and advanced. The functionality is similar in each of those. It's not exactly the same because of some of the changes in Pro and because not everything in ArcMap is in Pro, or everything in Pro. Yeah, not everything in ArcMap is in Pro. So, but basically it's the same sort of idea. Basic license, you can work with personal geodatabases, and you need an advanced or a standard level license to work with enterprise geodatabases. And some of the more advanced cartography tools and things you need an advanced license for. So that's all very similar. Yeah, so are there any other questions you have? I'll come out here where I can see you. Yes?
How can I manage, sorry. How can I manage geostatistic tools? And is it rebuilt completely to the 64-bit code?
So, am I on? There we go. Yes. The geostatistical analysis tools are all in Pro right now. They came over with the very first release, and they are all 64-bit natively in Pro. So you should be able to use them right away. Other questions? Yes.
Yeah, do you need to be online to use the ArcGIS Pro?
Do you need
to be online?
Yeah. Sorry, I'm used to repeating all the questions because we don't usually have the microphone, so I'll try to get out of that habit. No, you don't need to be online to use ArcGIS Pro. You can run it. Actually, I'm offline right now. I'll show you where to check that real quick. So your license initially will need to check either online or portal. But once it's done that check, you've got this little checkbox that says authorize ArcGIS Pro to work offline. And see, I didn't know what my internet access would be on this trip, so I checked that off before I left. So you don't need to be online to use it. At Pro 1.2, we're also implementing concurrent use licensing, the same concurrent use licensing you have in ArcMap for ArcGIS Pro. So you'll be able to use that or use the online licensing. It just depends what works better for you guys. Other questions? Yeah. No.
Thank you for your answers. I would like to ask you about SVG support, format support, when importing marker symbols. Is it planned or is it incorporated in the current version?
That's a very good question. It is not in the current version. It is planned. I don't know if it'll be in, it won't be in 1.2, which is the release coming out early next year. It may be in 1.3. I haven't seen the final plans for 1.3 yet. 1.3 is planned for middle of next year, July timeframe. But it is planned. We don't have it right now, though. It's a good question.
Thank you for the presentation. I just wonder, I'm sorry if you talk about it because I wasn't here for the whole time. I was at the city agent as well. But you present the two-dimensional and three-dimensional view. You can switch in between, etc. And talking about large data sets, there is a concept of scale-dependent map in 2 dimensions, but this concept works differently in 3D. So my question is if and how you deal with these different concepts, because in 3D it depends on the observer position and the view direction. So if you can answer that.
I'll try to answer that. So yes, the scale dependency and how things draw based on scale is very different between 2D and 3D. That's one of the things when I was going through the difference between a 2D map and a 3D map. So with 3D, we're doing a lot of that handling for you. It's automatic and it's happening in the background, so that as you're looking at a 3-dimensional view from a vantage point or from some area, things are going to fade out in the background. You can set a distance to where things drop off. So you can control that part, but we're also doing some filtering, if you will, so if someone hasn't set that up, you still don't want to draw everything clear in the background because you wouldn't see it, and it would become just a big drawing hassle because the drawing engine has to draw all of it. So we're doing some control over it if you don't set a background that you're dropping off at. So that's in 2D, you have a whole other way of doing that by setting the drawing layers. And this is something new coming in 1.2. Actually, we've got a new way of defining your symbol scale dependencies inside the layer, inside the symbol itself. So as you're authoring these multi-scale 2D maps, you have a lot more control over what layers appear at certain scales and what ones don't based on the symbol. And so you don't have to copy all your layers into like 30 different layers and set scale dependency on each layer. You can set those scale dependencies inside of a single layer. It's something new that's coming at 1.2. I just thought I'd let you know. I just saw a demo of it last week. It's really cool. Yes?
I suppose there is also Arc catalog implemented. Is there foreseen any functionality like trash if I delete some feature in the ARC catalog, or is deleted completely?
Okay, so there is ARC catalog type functionality in Pro. Not all of ARC catalog functionality is in Pro yet, so I'll preface it with that. Is there this concept of trash and being able to, you know, if you delete something, is it deleted permanently? Can I bring it back? Two things. So it depends on the type of thing you're deleting. If you are deleting a feature class in a enterprise geodatabase, we don't have this concept of trash to bring it back. If you're deleting an item in your map or in your project, we have that undo stack that I was showing you, which is actually, it goes way back. You can bring things back from that undo stack from a long way. So you can use that as if it were a trash, actually. So you can undo a lot of different operations, but there are a few that you can't undo. But there isn't like a trash bin you drag stuff to and then pull stuff out of. Does that make sense? All right, I think, yeah, I'm out of time, and I know you guys want to get to the evening social. So I'm going to be here this evening, and I'll be here all day tomorrow. So if you have more questions, come find me. I'll be around, and I appreciate you all coming. Thanks. Have a good rest of your conference.